Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is Ernie Epp, Professor Emeritus from Lakehead University, and he's sharing a bit about his project, The Science of Public Finance. So welcome back, Ernie.
Right.
We're just starting to get into the work you've been engaged in the last year or so. As a history buff, I believe that looking back over a number of years and what has happened in the past helps us to understand what's happening now and the direction we need to go in. So
I couldn't agree more.
So you started looking at public finance back 50, 60 years ago.
70 and more years ago.
70 years ago.
Yes, at some point near the completion of the website, I began to think that I was making assertions which people could always debate, doubt, and so on and so forth. We needed as much hard evidence as we could find. And so I decided to go to the Canada yearbooks in the first order. I looked at the public accounts of Canada, and I decided to put all of this in the context of national accounts. And without mystifying our viewers too much, these two different bodies of information, the national accounts are the ways in which Statistics Canada, working on globally understood principles, endeavors to clarify what is going on, the way in which people are producing, what incomes come out of the process of production and service, and how the income is spent, so that there are the two sides, if you will, to national accounts, the income accounts and the expenditure accounts. There's a lot more, of course, that is relevant to that, employment patterns, industrial changes, and so on. But for my purposes, I was interested in the income that was generated and how that was spent. And one thinks, of course, of wages, salaries, supplementary labor income, if you will. Labor income is the most significant of the streams, to my mind. And of course, it aggregates so much in the way of money. And then the way in which the personal expenditures occur, what people do with that money in the way of personal expenditures on goods and services, and of course the taxation, the expenditures by government, which aren't just personal income tax, of course, to go to the public accounts now, but do involve other sources of revenue as well. So we have income and expenditure accounts in the national accounts, and then we have the public accounts of the government, which is, of course, revenue in the taxation and other sources, and the way in which that is spent, which is sort of the two sides again, in a similar way in the public accounts.
Let me just rephrase.
Yes,
so in a
course.
way, so you're looking at both what the federal government brings in and spends,
That's
but
right.
you're also looking at the larger economy in terms of what all the wages that people get.
Yes, in a sense.
And they interrelate, but
Yes.
they're two separate kind of sources of information.
In a sense, you could say that if I start with taxing and spending, if you will, then I place them in the larger context of what is going on in the country.
Okay.
Because I want to see how these impact on each other. And there are, of course, lots of connections. I'm not thinking that I have captured them all, but what I have endeavored to do in dozens of tables for each of the ministries that has existed since the Second World War is to get the key income and expenditure tables, the taxation and spending tables, the budget balance or lack of balance, the deficits, and so on and so forth. And then I've got into the importance of the spending that takes place, particularly the transfers to individuals, which are very large. I mean, this is one of the...
And what's a transfer to an individual?
Well, probably the easiest way to understand that is to think of the old age security pension. Or think of...
That's what I'm getting now. I'm one of those folks.
Okay. Well, I am too, as a matter of fact, and guaranteed income supplement. Or you think of employment insurance benefits and others. And I've done tables of those amounts. And these are among the really concerning, almost in a sense, the frightening aspects of fiscal activity, which are rarely discussed, if at all, and certainly neglected in the political discussions we mostly see at the moment, not entirely in the NDP one, but I think in the other parties, it's really neglected. There's no appreciation of the rigidity that there is in the budget, because you can't cut these. These are established by law.
Right.
Or you have the transfers to the provinces for such things as health care, and those again are established by agreements. So when you have billions and billions of dollars flowing out, and the government is cutting taxes to maintain its political popularity so that the tax base, or the basis for these transfers, becomes smaller and smaller, then you have, as happened in this last year, you have the government not spending everything that that Parliament approved for expenditure. You have the veterans, for example, with offices being closed and so on, services being cut in order to balance the budget, because the Conservative government, Jim Flaherty, had given away tax space, cut the corporate taxes and cut the GST, and lost the revenues.
So now let me just, there's so much here, and
Yeah.
we're in the middle of an election. The show may air after the election, but it's an area that's fundamental to us in our participation in terms of choosing a course ahead as citizens of the country. So you've been looking at these over 70 years, the changes that have happened. Let's just talk a little bit about the revenue side. What has changed over that time in terms of who pays into the federal coffers?
Well, I suppose one of the most dramatic changes that has taken place is that corporate income tax has fallen as a significant source of revenue, while personal income tax has held its own or grown. And it's very interesting to discover that in 1943, the Canadian government instituted the system that we simply take for granted now, which is that every payday, some of your pay goes to the Canada Revenue Agency, prepaying in a sense, or paying as you go, your
Right.
personal income tax. The most mind-blowing aspect of the World War II finance that I found was on the corporate side, where they decided to establish a standard profit for corporations, which was the average that each corporation had achieved over the last 4 years of the Depression, 1936 to 39. And they told corporations in 1943, sort of the height of the war, enormous expenditures, that they would be allowed to keep 116 2/3% of the standard, that average profit, and the government would take all the rest in order to try to raise by taxation at least half of what they were spending. They were spending over $5 billion, and taxation was only bringing in $2.5 billion at that time.
So my understanding is that right after World War II, we really were in a time of strong economic growth. A lot of public services were established. Corporations then were paying what? What percentage of their profit?
I'll hesitate to give you an exact number at this time, but they certainly were paying enough. It would be 30 to 40%. Just pulling a number out of the air now, sufficient to ensure that the budgets over the first 12 years after the war were pretty well all balanced.
And now where are we at now?
Well, the current rate, which is in debate in this election campaign, is 15%. And one of the things I've done in this, the book that I'm writing in developing these tables and commentary on them, is to suggest, what if the corporations paid 1/3 of their profits in tax?
Hang on to that. We need to take a short break. We'll be right back. Please stay with us.